Hey, First Draft Club. Lately, I've been thinking about long-term goals and how to get my head around them. Primarily because since summer started, I have realized that everything that I've wanted to do all of the sudden was a long-term goal. And this posed some mindset challenges for me that I want to talk about today. So let's go. Welcome to the First Draft Club, a podcast to help you write your book with joy, clarity, and maybe a few coffee stains. I'm Mary Atkins. Okay, first I decided at the beginning of the summer that I wanted to get my house organized. Not one room, but my entire house. I am someone you might call not tidy. Don't be fooled by the beautiful scene behind me. That is only one room of my house. On the spectrum of hoarding, I feel like I am at the low end, but I'm on the spectrum. You know, I accumulate stuff, and because I don't know where to put it, I just make little piles. I have a lot of semi-organized piles everywhere. And you know, while this isn't the biggest deal in the world, I can tell it stresses out my husband. And occasionally it reaches a point where it stresses me out a little bit too. And so I decided that summer was going to be when I organized. And then summer came and I was facing an entire house as my project. Second, I had wanted for several months to resume my French study. If you have been around me for very long, this podcast very long, or just my online world online of writers, you know that I have been trying to learn French for approximately 1 million years. And this month I am leading a writing retreat in France. I know I will feel best and proudest of myself if when I get there, I have taken some recent lessons to kind of freshen up and brush up on my French before I go. When I say learn French, I mean I know quite a bit of French. I studied it for 12 years in school, but I got very stale. I didn't study or speak it for many years, and so it's really trying to bring back what I had learned once upon a time. And yet the point is another long-term fuzzy, we'll say, goal. And finally, I have secretly started watercoloring. It began, as most things do these days, for me, with an Instagram ad. I saw this adorable watercolor box, like a little traveling watercolor set. And I thought, I want to do that. I want to be that person who uses that kit. And I immediately had this fantasy of sitting with my kid in Luxembourg Garden in Paris and making our little watercolor paintings. The thing is, I don't paint. I've literally never taken a painting class. I did a paint by number of Frida Kahlo on a Mexican vacation earlier this year. I will put a photo of that painting in the blog version of this podcast, only if you promise not to be too impressed by it. But say two, that is all the painting I have. And so I had this interesting moment earlier this summer where I thought, everything I want to do over the next couple months is like a long-term fuzzy or big goal. You know, it's not something small like just write this one essay or, just organize the fridge. Or like run 2 miles. Like it wasn't something I could just knock out in a day. And I thought, I don't really know how to motivate myself towards something that I can't knock out in just one day or even 1 week. I don't know how to do that while, juggling everything in my regular life. I have emails to respond to, right? Parenting to do, a business to run. All 3 goals were also sort of humbling goals. They were all things where like I was going to be bad at them and make a mess first before things got better. Even cleaning the house, right? Even organizing. It's like, if you're doing the old home edit method or really any sort of any home organizing people are going to tell you, you take out everything first and then you expunge and then you find where everything goes. In other words, it gets messy before it gets better. So this isn't just a lack of immediate gratification I was looking at. This is a situation where it felt like the gratification wasn't even really in sight. It was like in Australia. The Australians were looking up at it in the sky, and I'm over here. Yes, with the house, I could tackle one room at a time, but even that, in case this is what you're thinking, even that for me is not a 1 day thing. Like one room is like a 3 day thing because I am the kind of person who gets distracted and is suddenly, I'm suddenly trying on every dress I've ever had, or like stain treating one corner of a rug for hours and I can't let it go. Like that's what happens to me. So this was my situation. I was staring down these 3 long-term goals and I thought, wait a second, I write books. That is what I do. Like that is a serious long-term goal that I know how to do. I have now written 5 of those. I've published 4 of them. So how do I motivate myself to get that done? What keeps me going in the beginning when really I'm just making a mess and there's no gratification yet there? Because that's certainly not something I get done in a week, or even 2 or 3 or 4. And I couldn't really remember, honestly, how we have quite a bit of amnesia when it comes to our own motivation and how we get things done. So I decided to use a rudimentary approach to achieving my long-term goals in this case, willpower. Good old willpower. I would just start. I went to Michael's and bought some watercolors. I watched a watercolor tutorial on YouTube. I woke up on Saturday morning and I made myself a little painting. And then I remembered how I write books. The painting was very bad. I'm not going to show it to you because I immediately threw it away. Actually, I didn't immediately throw it away, but I have since thrown it away. I tried to paint a photograph of my kid in the pool with his goggles on, meaning I used the photograph as inspiration, the photograph of my kid. So it wasn't a good painting, but I had had a good time. This is the important part. I had felt a little rush doing it. I was listening to Amy Poehler's new podcast while I was painting, and then suddenly an hour had passed and I had broken the seal. And it reminded me that when I start a novel, it's the same way. I sort of have to muscle my way into writing the first sentence, the second sentence, third, fourth, maybe the 20th sentence. But at some point, pretty early on, it gets fun. There's nothing glamorous or inspired about the writing itself, or even getting started. It's very much just like putting on my big girl pants and like rolling up my sleeves to wash the dishes. But pretty early on, again, like pretty soon, I do experience a kind of rush of pleasure of creating. And suddenly I'm enjoying myself enough that I want to do it again. And this truly, I think, is the trick, so to speak, the trick to achieving a long-term goal. You forget about the goal. You don't think about the goal at all, or at least very seldom. You focus on what you like about the process, because that's what you're going to be motivated to do day by day. That's what's going to make you actually keep showing up. And if you keep showing up, you just eventually get to your goal. Years ago, a French tutor I had hired told me as much. She said, I had asked her what homework I should be doing every day. And she kind of looked at me curiously, because this wasn't a class. This was just someone I had hired to speak French with me. And she kind of looked at me curiously and said, if you're not enjoying it, you're not going to do it. And so she recommended not thinking of anything as homework. Truer words have never been spoken in my case. The most French I've studied over the past few years has been when I have gotten hooked on French sitcoms and the language itself becomes incidental to me enjoying watching them and being invested in the plot. And honestly, this has really improved my French, like more than any college class I ever took. If you want French sitcom recommendations, by the way, I have them. So I applied this to my watercoloring and realized I didn't actually want to do the little abstract exercises in the online course I had purchased. I didn't want to paint the little flower sets. I wanted to jump straight to painting the realistic portraits. Harder? Hell yes. More fun? Hell yes, for me. And so I decided to go for the harder thing, because otherwise I probably wouldn't do it at all. I wanted to go for the thing that sounded fun to me, no matter how hard or easy it was. Many, many years ago, I did the same thing with fiction. I had never written a short story that I was proud of. I had only written a couple of them at all, and one of them had gotten me a B- in the only creative writing class I ever took in college. But what I wanted to write was a novel. And so I went from 0 to 60 when it came to fiction, and I wrote a novel before I had ever written a decent short story. The novel wasn't even garbage. It became my first published novel, and it launched my career. It turned out you don't need to master a short story in order to write a novel. Mastering the short story wasn't some kind of rite of passage, like the boring painting exercises. I am not advocating for delusion around your skill level, right? Like my watercolor portraits right now are, let's just say I haven't totally nailed the facial proportions. But I am showing up. I am showing up and I am practicing in a way that I feel motivated to do because I want to, because I like it. I want to keep showing up. And during this critical early period in a long-term project, even in the middle, frankly, until really you get to the revision phase, showing up is the only thing that matters. It is certainly the most important thing that matters. To summarize, what are some ways to help you look forward to writing? Okay, here are a few tips. Number one, be open to different ways of writing. As I talked about in a previous episode this season, I actually dictated a pretty sizable proportion of the novel that I'm working on now. That was the medium I found that I could look forward to, walking and talking. So just be open to like, what do you want to do? What is the mode that you are drawn to? Number two, remember that you can skip around. If you're in a dark mood, you don't have to make yourself write a love scene or a fun party scene, or vice versa. You are allowed to let your mood dictate what scenes you write, and those can be out of order. And number three, my favorite, remember that if you're bored, so is your reader. Sorry, I know that's a bummer to hear, but it's true. So ask, what makes this story interesting to you? Are you writing the equivalent of those boring painting exercises because you feel some sort of obligation to like get the reader up to speed or like establish backstory or to create an inciting incident or a call to action, all terms that I loathe? Because, maybe you just say screw it to the equivalent of grammar drills or spelling tests, and you write what lights you up, no matter how crazy or weird or ambitious it seems. Okay, just to really summarize here, I think we reach our giant long-term goals when we make the steps of getting there something we look forward to, which isn't to say the work stops being hard, but hard and fun can coexist. So where can you find that overlap? Next week, I'm going to be talking about what my 7-year-old recently taught me about art. See you then.